You are now entering the horror sanctum.
Hello and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay with John, Kellen, and TJ. We were also joined this week by our pal, the one and only Vito Trigo. Vito, welcome back.
Thanks, guys, for having me.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. I talked to you, I don't know, probably a couple months ago. I'm like, you've been on the show a couple times. I don't know that you've necessarily ever picked what movie we talk about. Like, we brought you on for other ones. You kind of got to say in Halloween Ends, I believe. But this time we're like, just give us a couple of options we'll pick. And you went with the 1992 classic Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. The first Hellraiser of the 90s. And man, it is very, very 90s. So Vito, let's go ahead and dive in with you. Tell us why this was one of your options and why you love it or hate it.
Well, I picked this one because I just wanted to, throw some gasoline on a fire, because this is a very, there's so many emotions and feelings about it. So, but and it was the first one that I saw. I saw Hellraiser 3 before I saw the other two. So, and I was like, so that was my experience with Pinhead. It was like this demonic force, and very but I didn't love it till I watched the first two movies leading up to it, and then I enjoyed it. Then I learned to love it, because it was it was Pinhead unadulterated. It was Pinhead without his human connection. Because if you follow the other two movies, he technically dies in the second one. And so he's like, and all that's left is this little entity that's left over from him, the actual Pinhead, the dark priest. And and so he's just running roughshod. So it's just a fun movie that I enjoy. I like it, but it's a mixed bag. It is definitely a mixed bag when I revisit it. There's some things that I really love about it, and some things I'm like, whose idea was this? But Pinhead is what does it for me, because it's sinister Pinhead. It's evil Pinhead, and you kind of have to wonder when you revisit the series, did this Pinhead stay on, or is it is he a mixture of the two? That's the whole thing of examining the other films. It's but this is
he's definitely more human in the first two. This is truly his delving into evil.
Well, because in the first two, he is a priest. He's the dark priest. He's got a job. He's very authoritative. He's like, you open the box, we came. And this one, he's Jesus Christ, not quite. He's
remind me, because I was half awake when I watched this after midnight this past week again for the first time in years. Did he ever come out of the statue thing at all?
Yeah.
At the very end, he did just a little bit.
Wait, I mean, in part two, you mean?
No, in part three.
He came out like the beginning.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He comes out halfway through the movie.
Yeah,
I thought just his face was kind of out. He was totally out.
Yeah, his face is there. His face is there.
Did you even watch the movie?
I've seen the movie.
That happens 15 minutes in. What the hell?
Half the movie is him being the biggest form of evil he could possibly be. Jesus Christ.
It's the Long Island.
He watched it in 2013. Leave it alone.
Jay, lean to the left a little bit.
Well, TJ, this is the parallel part.
Look at Jay's screen and tell me if you even recognize that, TJ.
Yeah, that's Hellraiser from part two.
I have to talk or you can't see it. Ta-da!
Because TJ,
from the movie.
Oh yeah, okay, I remember.
We discussed Halloween. Is Michael Myers in this? Was he actually in this?
When Freddy invades his dreams, that was amazing.
Well, TJ, this is the parallel thing we're talking about here, because like in the first one with Frank, who's trying to get bodies so he can reform himself. Pinhead does that in the third one with the sleazy club owner. He's give me more people so I can reform.
Yeah, and then they have a callback to that where he kind of eats the girl's skin.
Yeah, and then the club owner, he gets eaten. It's after two. Pinhead just needed two people, really. That we saw. And then he's just boom, I'm out, guys. So
Yeah, it's
I like. You said, did you like the Cenobites in this one? I want everybody to answer that one.
I have another thing here. I have another thing. This is my big thing I don't like about the third one, is that the other Cenobites, they talk a lot. They talk too much. Pinhead is the front man of the band. He's the one singing the songs. They're there in the background with the, they're playing the instruments. They're doing the backup vocals. They're not supposed to be like the freaking camera guys. I just, you ready for your close up, Joey? You ready for your close up, Joey? Better than sex, better than sex, better than sex. I'm like, yo, why are you guys talking?
okay. This
It's
is
All
awful.
three is John Lennon got
Awful.
his Yoko.
This has got to be a reel with Run DMC playing. You talk too much. Like we've got to make a reel of that.
No,
I
seriously.
agree 1,000% on that, Vito. That was one of my notes. I'm like, did any of the other Cenobites talk? And none of them had one-liners,
The
right?
woman does in 2.
Yeah.
The woman
Wait,
has
wait,
like 2 lines in 2, but that's pretty much it.
Well, because she's the right hand. She's like, she's like, when Pinhead's not around, she's in charge.
Mhm.
Right.
So that's a thing. So these other guys are like, like trying to be funny. I'm like, shut up, bitches.
It's hell, but they still follow a hierarchy. Damn.
Right.
I mean, yeah, man. That's what I
So,
was like.
it's interesting. This movie is directed by Anthony Hickox, who passed recently. He did Waxwork,
Man.
did a lot of movies, sequels. If you ever look up Anthony Hickox, it's not Axl Rose. I know you think it's Axl Rose. It's not. He looks just like the lost brother of Axl Rose. It's kind of uncanny. Yeah, I've seen this movie twice, maybe 2 or 3 times. I liked it more the first time. I think now I'm kind of in the middle of the road on it now. I don't dislike it. I don't love it, but it's a silly early 90s horror movie. It's got Dimension, Miramax written all over it. You can just the style and all. The first thing I noticed in the movie was the cameraman Doc. That whole character seems like he was ADR'd. Like the way his voice is, it doesn't match his face. He looks older. Like some of the characters in the movie, it seems like maybe they did a lot of ADR work on them. Something about it just didn't add up. And I could be wrong, but it's just, I don't know if you guys noticed that.
Well, John,
I wonder if they
used
used some British actors, and then because of the setting of it supposed to be in New York, even though it totally wasn't filmed in New York,
Right.
if they might have changed some of the voices or whatnot.
I don't know.
Well, it was a rush production.
Right.
I remember it was a rush production. They apparently that was a thing with the actors. Like they didn't have a lot of time to get comfortable with the role, so maybe
Right.
they did go back and try to fix it in ADR and be like, "Hey, let's fix these lines." But
Yeah.
John, with that guy specifically, when you
Yeah.
first saw him, did you think Hulk Hogan's father?
Right. Papa Hogan, maybe.
Yeah, I was like, it's Hulk Hogan's in this fucking movie. What the fuck?
The first scene in the club. It's made in 1992, so I kept thinking Wayne's World. I don't know why. I was waiting for Wayne and Garth to show up, and I don't know, Crucial Taunt to be playing or something. It was something about it reminded me of Wayne's World.
Well, they would have rocked out to that Motorhead Hellraiser tune that kicks off the end credits.
Oh yeah, yeah. The music in this is pretty awesome. A lot of good rock music, a lot of good early 90s type music. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels to the first one. The main guy, JP Monroe, he's kind of got a Frank thing going on where he's wanting more and more. And I mean, there's a lot of parallels between the first one and this one. The reporter girl is kind of like Christy, and she's, got the box. And so there's a lot of it's almost kind of, I guess you could say, like a loose remake in a way. The Cenobites themselves are kind of hilarious. They're just, you've got CD Head, you've got Camera Head, you've got one guy that when I first saw it, I thought, what is he, Chili's mixed margarita guy or something? He's got the mixer and he's walking around. But overall, it's not a bad movie. It's fun. It's nice to hear the Hellraiser theme over and over. It's not the Christopher Young version, I don't think, but it sounds the same, right? Good practical effects, fun. It's nowhere. I mean, the first one is a masterpiece. The first one is close to a 5-star movie in my opinion. The second one is really good. This one is just fun. It's not great. It's not bad by any means, but yeah, and I know a lot of people probably have nostalgia for this, like if you watched it back in the day. I didn't watch it when it first came out, so I kind of almost have like a Kellen approach to it where I see it way later, so I'm looking at it through old John eyes versus like 90s John eyes. So yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I'm curious what you guys think.
So,
Hey, John, John, one sec. How would you compare this to, like, let's say, like Nightmare on Elm Street 4? Dream Master.
I would prefer Nightmare on Elm Street 4. I've become a Freddy fan, and I've kind of turned the corner on Freddy. I would prefer Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and 4 for sure.
But you can see the similarities there. Were like, it's kind of like, they infuse rock.
Yeah.
The antagonist is like, more demonic and kind of trying to, like, being funny.
Mm-hmm.
I was just knowing similarities there. I'm like, okay, this is just what happened in the late 80s, early 90s. We're like, they're trying to make it more fun.
Oh yeah, Pinhead and Freddy. There's definitely some copying going on there. The way their characters in the sequels at least. So yeah.
well, and Pinhead's less puns and more ominous quotes. it's more, when he says something, it almost sends a chill up your spine because it's so, I mean, ominous. I mean, for lack of a better word, and for lack of a better English understanding in my part. But before we move on, I liken Hellraiser 1 and 2 to Halloween 1 and 2 in that it's kind of like a part A, part B. You could literally put them both in, watch them back to back, and it's one continuous story. And so I judge them the same. I'm with John. Hellraiser 1 is just spectacular. It's rare you can introduce somebody in a horror film like Pinhead that becomes so iconic. And most of us can name off the most iconic horror villains, antagonists, whatever you want to call them, of the past 30, 40 years, going back to Leatherface. So to be able to create a character so iconic, speaks for itself. And then the movie introduces some amazing concepts. The special effects for the time are all practical, so they're fun to watch. And then we get to Hellraiser 3, and it's like they decided, so we're done with that. we're not going to do what we did then. We're going to do something completely different. And it reminds me of a lot of what they do now with the horror movies, where they take the property and just make their own movie. But it's not bad.
Blumhouse.
And
excuse me.
So you have to get the microphone out of your mouth. What was that, TJ?
I said Blumhouse.
Oh, okay. But they did it in a way that made it feel like they were like something unique, instead of like they're just trying to build off of the Pinhead name and just sell some tickets. And that's because they do kind of develop Pinhead more. The first two movies are more about what's happening to the protagonists in the movie, and the antagonist in the first one is the stepmother, or the wife. She's the bad guy in those films. And we were, before the episode started, when we were talking, Vito mentioned that he was more of just kind of like the priest of hell. He wasn't evil per se. He was just carrying out his duty in that role. And he even letting the girl go in the first one because she assisted him in fulfilling that goal. And him even helping in the second one as he learns his humanity. Anyway, all that aside, they totally took his humanity and both metaphorically and literally separated him in this movie by having his human self be kind of like in the dreams of the girl. And I'm terrible with names. I'm not going to try to tell you any of them. You can chime in if you want to know their names. I'm sure one of the other guys knows them. But the main girl in the movie, he's kind of coming to her because he understands what's coming, because it's him. And then we see the battle between good and evil of the same person, kind of like a metaphor for everybody's good and evil sides. So it's a really good concept. It's a really interesting take. And I enjoy in this movie the fact that they make Pinhead truly evil. Before, he's not so evil. In this one, he is demonic. Like, his goal in life is to create suffering. And so I really enjoy the development of that character beyond just being something visually stunning.
Well, because there's even like when Spencer is facing off with Pinhead, he even says, "You made me." You know, it's like he's like,
yeah,
because he's a part of him.
Yeah.
You know, he's from him. So
yeah, and it plays more onto that whole desires thing that the whole Hellraiser thing is kind of based on. Is it's a perversion of people's biggest desires, like his longing for that statue to be in his house, and then longing for more than all this other stuff that he's got. He desires more and more and more, and Pinhead offers to give him more. Granted, he doesn't understand what that means at the time when he brings the first girl over to be a sacrificial lamb, but he's playing into this guy's darker desires for things.
well, it's funny because when you bring that up, it makes me think of the original movie really fast, where it's like when he says, like, you know, the line "demons to some, angels to others." You know, now he's just like purely demon. He has no interest in being like in your pleasure, so to speak. He's all about pleasuring himself now.
Yeah,
I'm gonna,
yeah.
because there's a line when he says to Joey, the female lead, he says, "I'm going to enjoy making you enjoy your suffering to that degree." It's like that's a little rapey. Pinhead,
Yeah, and they play more in the most recent one to that whole desires idea where pain is the ultimate pleasure, and this is and it's kind of like the whole mythos of the Cenobites is they're kind of what a bastardization of their biggest desires on Earth, and you could probably peel apart. Speaking of which, the reveal in 2 when the Chatterer is a child. I made myself laugh at that. First, the shock of seeing that it's a kid, but then I was like, I bet he was a biter. So that's what he became in afterlife. He just liked biting people. He was that kid. But
you don't want to know the backstory on him then.
No,
I went a deep dive and I was like, this is a mistake. This is a mistake.
I can imagine. So a couple of points and then I'll pass it on. The CD head guy, the CD head Cenobite, I swear I had the biggest Mandela effect because when I first watched this, I could have swore he shot the CDs out of his mouth like an ejector. Just
same.
And then
I could have sworn that too.
And then they don't even his mouth looks like a CD slot, but not one time does a CD go into or out of it. It comes out of his chest and he throws it like a boomerang. I was like, what the hell is that? That's not as cool as I remember it. So that was kind of a letdown, but it was a personal letdown because my brain failed me, which is not the first time that's happened.
Or your reality just changed.
Maybe it did. Maybe I'm in the Matrix. Oh, that would be nice. Unplug me. No, okay, I'm kidding. There's a couple of things we talked about. It was very 90s. The spitting of the bullets that Pinhead does was so dumb. Oh my god, when they shoot the statue and he's like, I mean, I'm like, come on, like, just have him absorb them and it'd be like it didn't do anything because I'm already dead.
It's funny you mentioned that because my thought when I watched that yesterday, I was like this. I think Doug Bradley is like really pissed right now. He's just like the way he spits it out is just like he's like, why?
When he has so many iconic scenes in this movie because they're, like I said, they're developing the evil Pinhead. The scene with the priest and where he blows up the candles and just some of the lines in the movie. One of them, I found the monster within the box and it found the monster within me. I mean, there's so many good quotable lines in this movie. They don't really explain why Pinhead was trapped in the flesh box very well. It doesn't really, they don't give you any backstory. It's just all of a sudden, here's this statue, and by the way, it's alive and it feeds off flesh.
Well, I think you said there was something about his evil being so, like, it was like so immense that it got trapped in the pillar.
Yeah, but it was like I said, it's throwaway. It's not something that's memorable, or it doesn't really go into detail. Like the other ones, it kind of shows, like especially in 2 with the Doctor becoming a Cenobite, it kind of shows that happen. This one, it doesn't even give you. It just, hey, by the way, he's in a block now. Just FYI.
I mean, it was at the end of Hellraiser 2. They did show the pillar at the end.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like they don't explain it in this one, so there's no real backstory. Okay. And two has a 5-minute prelude in it that shows you what happened in 1 to kind of get you caught up for 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one, they're just like, you just accept it. if you don't know what's going on, it's too bad.
Which
and
is
then-
very, very 80s. Like, here's our 5-minute recap at the beginning of the movie. There you go. You know.
And then the last point I'll make, and then I'll pass it on. One of the funniest lines in the whole movie is a throwaway line, and it's just one of those things that if you're paying attention and you catch it, you're like, okay, come on, that's pretty crappy writing. The guy's explaining what Pinhead is and what happens if he comes to Earth, and says if he makes it here, he'll be unbound and unstoppable. And in the same breath, explains how to stop him. Like, how can you say he'll be unstoppable unless we do these very specific things that are totally easily done? How is that your big reveal? Like, you're supposed to be building up that he's going to come to Earth and be this unstoppable force, and then you're like, but if you just do this one little thing right here, he's going to be pointless. And that's when Elliot, his human self, is talking to her and explaining about the coming doom. But overall, I enjoy this movie. I'm going to say something very blasphemous right now. It's probably my favorite of the series.
What?
Wow.
And
Wow.
John and I have
He's not
talked about this
saying the
kind of stuff
best.
before.
He's not saying the best. He's
John-
saying his favorite.
That's fair.
Yes.
That's fair.
John
That's fair.
John and I have had this conversation multiple times.
Okay.
1 is the best, 3 is my favorite.
That's fair.
And it's just a personal thing when I sat and watched them. And 5 is up there for me too, and I know that's usually one of everybody's least favorite.
Is that Bloodlines?
No,
that's the
Bloodlines
one.
4.
That's the one where they go into the
Inferno.
the game or
is
whatever.
5.
Inferno.
Inferno,
Okay.
yeah.
Gotcha.
So
I thought that was
So-
the one with the Hellbreed, Nightbreed dude.
I like the one with Henry Cavill.
that was
But-
that was great too.
Yeah.
Like the cheesier they get, the better it was for me, because they started going less into like noir horror and more into cheesy B movie. So but I'm done.
I think that Hellraiser 3 was a victim of its own success, because it was the most profitable out of the series. You know, so there was no like, hey, we did good with this one, let's see where we can go. You know, so then down the line, here we are.
It probably had a wider release, I believe, too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, so this was the first film really where they created Hellraiser as a series, right? And it was the first film that acknowledged Doug Bradley as Pinhead and actually given him that name in the film. And people referring to him and in the credits being Pinhead. The first 2 films, he's just the lead Cenobite. I first watched this movie not exactly when it first come out, because I was 8 years old when it first come out, but I watched it in the late 90s, I believe, on cable probably. And I remember really liking it. In fact, it might have been, if you'd asked me at that point in time, I had seen the other 2 by that point in time, but it might have been my favorite at that point in time. I think revisiting it, and I hadn't watched this in well over 10 years. It's been a minute. I hadn't owned this one. I've always pretty much owned some version of the first 2, because like Kellen said, I've always considered it as kind of a 1-2 punch, kind of a Halloween 2. You can't have one without the other kind of situation. It's a great complement 2-part film. Hellraiser 3 probably picks up just very loosely on the mythology of the first 2, just about more than any of the other sequels. And I haven't watched probably half of the sequels. Like I tapped out about 5 in, honestly, probably after Inferno, after they started doing like Hell World and Deader and all those things. That is, movies that weren't actually even intended to be Hellraiser movies, and then they just kind of shoehorned Pinhead and some Cenobites into them, that kind of thing. But I did like, even though it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, that they tried to because they got the art house where the studio owner, bought the statue that housed the Cenobites, got it from supposedly the sanitarium where the girl, who's supposedly just banished the Cenobites had supposedly sculpted it somehow. Because I guess they had some kind of weird art exchange program with the crazies in the sanitarium. But that was kind of the loose thread of the sanitarium from part 2. And that was the birth of this pillar somehow. I don't know. They didn't really tie the pieces together well, but I appreciate that they attempted to have some kind of thread of continuity in there. If you hear moaning, it's my cat trying to get in.
Sure.
Anyway, I like this, but when I rewatched it this past week, I was like, wow, these really early 90s digital and composite special effects really don't hold up. But it makes it even more cheesy, right? It's definitely of its era. You know, it's not the Terminator 2 level kind of CGI they were doing back then. It's you know, it's the on the cheap version, you know, like Power Rangers, the TV show kind of special effects. But you know, there's been a handful of things that have always stuck with me in this film, like the first kill of Pinhead, where he kind of eats the girl and eats her skin, which is kind of a callback to the skinlessness in the first film with Frank. And then I like that. I like that it kind of gets up and going with the kills and stuff pretty more quickly than some of the other films.
Oh, we haven't even talked about the nightclub scene where he murders everybody.
Yeah,
Right,
and the
right.
blood
It's
going
a
through the
massacre.
door.
It's,
like,
it's probably
seeping
the
out.
most. It's probably the most kills technically per capita of any Hellraiser film, at least that I've seen. And there's some very memorable Cenobites. Like I couldn't have told you the whole plot of this film. For some reason, I had it in my head that Pinhead was like stuck in a mirror or a picture or something, but it was a statue. You know, I couldn't really remember the specifics of it. It had been a minute since I'd seen it. But I have always remembered the camera Cenobite and the CD Cenobite. Like those are iconic to me. They're some of my favorite Cenobites. They're very much of the 1992 time and the era, you know, when CDs were new. And, you know, it does make me pose this question, though, because the first 2 films and really the whole mythology of all of the Cenobites is like this sex versus death, like this very kinky, you know, S&M kind of thing, which makes me think, okay, all these Cenobites, is that just kind of like their kink taken to the 10th degree? Like, is the CD guy, like, is he like into weird sex with CDs? Is the camera guy like filming it? I don't know. It's
Well,
just
in my head, in my head, TJ, I just put that because Pinhead is, you know, unencumbered. That he's just like, if I want to make you a Cenobite, you're gonna become a Cenobite. You know, I'm gonna force this on you. Yeah. You know, because the cameraman was the main lady's, you know, like, you know, sidekick before, like, you know, the other girl came around, kicked him out of the movie. You know, so it was really, there wasn't a whole lot of you know, like what was the kink thing going on there. I think Pinhead was just like, I'm gonna make you a Cenobite, you know.
so you think that's more Pinhead's kink, because I'm just
Yeah.
gonna turn you into
Yeah.
what I want you to be.
Yeah.
I think. All right. I'll roll with that. But yeah, I like this film. I don't think it holds up as much as I thought it did in retrospect. But and where it doesn't hold the same caliber as the first 2 films, I do think it still has a lot of merit as like a B cult film that you know has its fun moments. Obviously, there's a massive tonal shift, which I was reading about this, and you know, Clive Barker had a hand in kind of hand selecting Hickox as a director. And the reason that he wanted him to do it was because in their conversations, he thought he understood the tone of the first 2 films and wanted to carry on that tone into the sequel, which I think we can all say didn't quite happen that way. You know, for whatever reason, there's a tonal shift that leads more towards camp than the first 2 films you could ever really say.
You mentioned Clive Barker. Wasn't he not a fan of the name Pinhead, and it just became so synonymous with the character that he was finally like, whatever.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think he ever called him Pinhead, and I don't think the books that allude to these characters ever named him as Pinhead initially.
It was like Dark Priest, like I think at one point Engineer, even though there is an Engineer character in Hellraiser 2, lead Cenobite, it was like a whole everything but
Yeah.
Pinhead.
Yeah, I think honestly the reason that this is the first film where it's called Pinhead is because the iconic imagery of the guy with the pins in his head, the fandom that come around it, the fans named him Pinhead to the point that by 1992, this is 5 years removed from the first film, they just kind of had to say, okay, he's Pinhead. Everybody's calling him Pinhead. Let's just lean into it. This is, still on the heels of the dying age of the Jason and the Freddys. They're making kind of their final films at the time, at least of that era. And they wanted a new, Dimension bought the rights so they could cash in on the next, horror infinity of sequels. And, they made like a dozen sequels out of this thing. And they needed that character, and that character needs a name. You can't have a nameless character to build a franchise around, right? They can put Pinhead's face on any poster and sell a movie, pre-sell a movie. Speaking of which, I did read the reason the initial, which this is fascinating to me, the reason the initial poster that come out for Hellraiser 3 looks so much like Hellraiser 1 is because it's the same damn picture. What they had made initially as the poster had Pinhead, Doug Bradley was like, he was like screaming, and the MPA said, no, it's too scary. We won't let you use this as part of the promotional material. So they had to really quickly basically take the one they already had and then just dress it up the background differently. And their argument was, well, you already approved this for the first film 5 years ago, so obviously it's good. And that moved through. So that's why it looks so similar. It's the same picture. So that was fascinating. But Jay, what'd you think?
So you guys touched on a lot of what I had. It's a bit of a nostalgia film for me. I remember the Cenobites. I remember the CD and the camera. So like you guys, I have kind of a fond spot for that in my heart too. I like the ending. It kind of felt like a Western almost, or like an Avengers movie where they all show up. That was just so 90s. It was such a 90s movie. And we talked about it earlier. I didn't recall I didn't rewatch 1 or 2. I haven't seen them probably a year or so. I couldn't recall if the other Cenobites in the other first 2 films spoke, but you guys said that the girl said a line or two, right? Tops.
Yeah,
maybe a line, yeah. Maybe.
There's some back and forth because there's a scene in 2 where Pinhead and her are literally messing with Kirsty.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But they didn't have one-liners. That was what stuck out to me on this one. Yeah. So that was a little much, but I overall like the Cenobites a lot in this one. We'll wrap things up with our rankings, but I have one question. At the end, where this building is, the interior design is the puzzle box, right? I assume everybody noticed that. Where do you think that was leading, or what direction it was trying to push us into thinking what that meant?
It was almost like it grew out of the ground. Like when she put the box in the cement, it was almost like the foundation of the building. Like the entire building was the lament configuration. I was wondering that too. That was a very odd setup.
Well, to me, I was like, this building's got all kinds of different rooms. Every room could be a new Hellraiser story, right?
Yeah.
It was like,
Didn't we kind of talk about that?
Evil.
Didn't we kind of talk about that with the new one? I think John may have mentioned it, that the thought that there could be multiple boxes, multiple lament configuration boxes. So each of the other Hellraisers might not even be part of the same storyline or story arc. It could be its own like multiverse kind of thing.
Well,
it's like there's 3 different Necronomicons, right? In the Evil Dead trilogy.
Well, with the lore, there is multiple boxes and there is multiple dimensions. There was even like the question of like, if there's this hell dimension, is there a heaven dimension? And it's one of those like, could people be searching for the heaven and then they just end up in hell? So Yeah.
So let's go around, give our rankings, and then we'll close up shop.
Are we not doing favorite kills?
We stopped doing that. How many episodes ago we stopped doing that?
Yeah, we haven't done that
There
in a
were just too
while.
many movies where there weren't really kills, so we moved
There's
on.
a lot of kills in this one, though.
I thought it was very dependent on the film.
I think we just stopped. We've evolved. But I gave it a 3. It has that nostalgia factor to me. And like you guys said, I think one's ultimately my favorite, but this is probably my second favorite of the series. It's just fun. It's almost silly to a degree, and sometimes that's what a series needs. It's kind of where all of the series go eventually. So it's naturally going to go there, then fucking space. So I gave it a 3. Vito?
I give it a 3. I give it a 3. I mean, like I have a lot of fun with it. It's like I said before, it's a mixed bag, but the things that I like about it, I really like. And I'm gonna be nostalgic right now. I'm gonna say that the club owner's death is my favorite death. I'm just gonna say that right now.
That was
He's a douchebag. I just love the way he died because he's like this, because she fed him to him, and then he's just like this. He just looks up, and Pinhead's like this, like, "That's right, bitch, you're mine."
John?
I do think you can tell this is definitely not Clive Barker. I mean, he worked on some of it, but it's not his vision, so it's different. I think with Pinhead, less is more. I've always thought that. Like in the first one, you don't see him much. The shadows and the way he's filmed is a lot scarier. I think it's fun. I don't love it, but it's not bad. I would say 2.5 out of 5, but I don't want that to make it seem like it's a bad movie. It's not. I'd say right in the middle, 2.5.
Yeah, Kellen.
Well, I'm gonna bump John's up to a 3 by giving it a 3.5. It's just it's so fun. It's like I said, it's a B movie trying to disguise itself as an A film, as an A horror film, but it's straight B cheese. Made for midday matinee on UPN or one of the scrambled channels back in the day, if you couldn't afford cable. So 3.5 for me.
TJ?
Yeah, I think if you had asked me based on my memory of the couple of times I watched this before, I would have probably leaned towards 3.5. But watching it again recently and just seeing how, it is a lot cheesier and campier than I remember it, which I like. But for me, it does diminish it based on just what comes before it a little bit. So I'm going to have to bump that down to a 3 out of 5. And just as an aside, because John said something that made me think of this. The reason Clive Barker wasn't as invested in promoting this film, which he did a little bit, was because this film was releasing concurrently with Candyman, which he was very involved in the making of. Which I really like Candyman a lot more in this movie. So
fair. So that puts us at a 3. So Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth 3 out of 5 CDs. All right, so that's gonna be it for this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok. Join our Facebook group to keep up with all the shit posting we're doing. So Vito, a pleasure as always.
Thank you for having me, guys.
And signing off, I'm Jay with John, Kellen, TJ, and Vito Trigo. And until next time,
keep it spooky. And what sights we will show you.
Are we doing the afterbirth?
The afterbirth.
Is that what it's called?
I want to do that. Wait,
that's what it's called now. The horror sanctum afterbirth.
Wow.
I mean, that is what the Hellraiser universe would call it.
What's everyone's favorite Pinhead quote? If you got one.
The one that from this one where he says Jesus Christ, and he says not quite. That was a good one.
Probably just the one about the suffering. Don't waste your tears. It's a waste to get suffering from the first one.
That is a good one. Honestly, my favorite quote in the whole series is actually quoting what is the shortest verse in the Bible, which is Jesus wept, which is actually from Frank right before it gets split in pieces in the first film.
That was improvised.
His dad.
And it was improvised. Yeah.
Wow.
Has anybody seen the documentary series that was on Screenbox?
I did.
Leviathan?
Yeah, it's really good.
I have yet to finish it because it's like 4 hours long, isn't it?
Yeah, all the
Ugh.
Screenbox documentaries are ridiculously long,
But you
really
want
good.
more. You want more after it.